The first time Ellie Chen stepped into Westmore Academy of Music, she kept her eyes fixed on the marble floor. Reflective enough to mirror her worn sneakers, expensive enough to make her wonder how many hours her father had scrubbed these same tiles. She clutched her violin case tighter, its cracked leather soft against her calloused fingers. "You must be lost," a voice called from behind the reception desk. The woman's platinum blonde hair was pulled into a severe bun, her smile practiced but empty. "Delivery entrance is around back." I have an appointment with Dean Hargrove," Ellie said. "About the scholarship audition." The receptionist's eyebrows arched like precise brushstrokes. "Name?" "Ellie Chen." Manicured nails clicked against a keyboard. "Oh, your..." Recognition dawned slowly. "You're Mr. Chen's daughter, the maintenance manager." Ellie nodded once. "Well." The woman straightened, a stack of already aligned brochures. "Dean Hargrove will be with you in 20 minutes. You can wait over there." Ellie settled into a leather chair that probably cost more than her father made in a month. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, she watched students crossing the courtyard. Designer bags, immaculate clothing, confidence that came from never questioning whether you belonged. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. "Eating Dao Ma?" "Yes, I'm here," she typed back. "Don't worry." A group of students entered the lobby, instrument cases slung across their shoulders like casual afterthoughts. At their center walked a tall young man with dark curly hair, gesturing animatedly. As he spoke, his audience laughed on cue. "Seriously, Nolan," said a girl with a glossy ponytail, "I don't know why they're even holding auditions. Everyone knows you're getting lead chair." Nolan Stone, Ellie recognized him from the Academy's website. 3-time national champion, son of renowned conductor Robert Stone, born holding a violin bow, according to his last profile in Strings magazine. His eyes brushed past Ellie, registered her presence, then moved on without interest, until they snapped back, landing on her battered violin case. "Is that a Bergonzi?" he asked, his voice cutting across the lobby. Ellie's hands tightened around the case. "Yes, interesting." Nolan stepped closer, his friends forming a half-circle behind him. "May I see it?" Every instinct told her to refuse. The violin was everything, her mother's final gift before returning to China 10 years ago. But denying, Nolan Stone in his kingdom would only draw more attention. She unlatched the case. Nolan's eyes widened slightly as she revealed the instrument inside. Despite its age, the violin gleamed with careful maintenance, its deep amber wood catching the light. "Quite a specimen," he said, his tone shifting to something less dismissive. "How did you come to possess it?" "It belonged to my mother, and she was a violinist." Nolan waited for more, but Ellie offered nothing else. After an uncomfortable silence, he straightened. "Well," he said, "it's a shame to see such an instrument wasted on someone who clearly can't appreciate its value. That's a concert-level violin." "I know what it is," Ellie said quietly. "Do you?" Nolan's smile was razor-thin. "Because those calluses suggest you've been holding it wrong for years." Heat rose in Ellie's cheeks as the group behind him snickered. "Miss Chen." The receptionist's voice cut through the tension. "Dean Hargrove will see you now." Ellie closed the case, latched it firmly, and stood. As she passed Nolan, he said just loudly enough for her to hear, "Good luck with your scholarship. We always need someone to tune our instruments before performances." The dean's office was lined with photographs of famous musicians, all past graduates. Of Westmore, their success hung in the air like a challenge. "Miss Chen," Dean Hargrove said, peering over half-moon glasses, "your application was unusual. We rarely accept students mid-semester, especially seniors." "I understand, sir. Your father has been with us for 15 years, an excellent employee." He tapped a folder on his desk. "But this is an elite institution. Our standards—" "I can play," Ellie interrupted, then immediately regretted it. "I mean, I'd like the chance to audition." The dean studied her for a long moment. "Very well. Professor Witten has agreed to evaluate you this afternoon. 4 o'clock. Studio C. Thank you. Miss Chen." His voice stopped her at the door. "Don't make me regret this courtesy to your father." When the door closed behind her, Ellie exhaled slowly. The first hurdle crossed, but the true test awaited. The practice rooms were tucked away in the east wing, far from the main performance spaces. As Ellie pushed open the door to Studio C, she found it already occupied. "Sorry," she said, backing away. "I was assigned—" "No, you're in the right place," said a silver-haired woman seated at a desk. "I'm Professor Whitten. You must be Ellie." A young man stood by the window arranging sheet music on a stand. With a jolt, Ellie recognized Nolan Stone. "What's he doing here?" The words escaped before she could stop them. Professor Whitten raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Stone is my teaching assistant. He'll be turning pages during your audition." She gestured to the center of the room. "Whenever you're ready." Ellie's fingers trembled slightly as she removed her violin from its case. From the corner of her eye, she saw Nolan smirk. "What will you be playing for us today?" Professor Whitten asked. "Sibelius, Violin Concerto in D minor." Nolan's eyebrows shot up. "That's ambitious." "First movement only," Ellie added, positioning her violin under her chin. Professor Whitten nodded. "Begin when you're ready." Ellie closed her eyes, drew a breath, and began to play. The first notes came out hesitant, thin. Her shoulders were too tight, her bow arm rigid with anxiety. As she moved into the technical passage, her fingers slipped on a shift, producing a sour note that made her wince. "Stop, stop," Professor Whitten interrupted. "Miss Chen, is this the first time you've played this piece?" "No, ma'am." "Then why does it sound like it is? Your intonation is unstable, your tempo erratic." Behind her, Nolan snorted softly. "I'm sorry," Ellie said. "May I start again?" "I don't think that's necessary," Professor Whitten said, making a note in her book. "This piece is clearly beyond your current abilities. Perhaps something simpler would—" "Please." Ellie stood her ground. "One more chance." The professor sighed. "Very well. Once more." As Ellie raised her bow again, Nolan moved closer, standing just behind her shoulder. She could feel his presence like a physical weight, waiting for her to fail. Her second attempt was marginally better, but still far below the standard expected at Westmore. When she finished, silence filled the room. "Miss Chen," Professor Whitten said finally, "I appreciate your ambition, but there is a significant gap between your current skill level and what we require for our scholarship program." "I understand," Ellie said, her voice barely audible. "Perhaps, with a year of intensive study at a preparatory program, you might—" "She's wasting your time, Professor," Nolan cut in, "and mine." "That's enough, Mr. Stone," Professor Whitten admonished, but without conviction. As Ellie packed away her violin, Nolan leaned close. "That Bergonzi deserves a real musician," he whispered. "Sell it to someone who'll do it justice." The hallway felt endless as Ellie walked away, her father's voice echoing in her mind. Sometimes silence is the best answer. But silence wouldn't get her into Westmore. Silence wouldn't fulfill the promise she'd made to her mother. 2 days later, Ellie stood outside the main auditorium, watching students filter in for evening rehearsal. The Westmore Academy Orchestra was preparing for their winter showcase, the event that opened doors to conservatory scouts and music industry professionals. She spotted her father moving between rows with a vacuum, invisible to the young musicians unpacking their instruments on stage. "Dad," she called softly. He looked up, surprise crossing his weathered face. "Ellie, what are you doing here?" "I need a favor." She took a deep breath. "I need to be here tonight, during rehearsal." Her father frowned. "You know that's not allowed." "Please, just let me sit in the back. No one will notice." His eyes, so like her own, searched her face. "Dean Hargrove called me about your audition." Ellie looked away. "I know. He said you weren't ready." "I wasn't." She met his gaze. "But I will be." After a long moment, he nodded toward a service door near the back of the auditorium. "That corner is dark during rehearsals. Be quiet. Leave before they finish." "Thank you," she whispered, squeezing his hand. From her hidden vantage point, Ellie watched as the orchestra assembled. Professor Kirkland, the conductor, called for their attention. "As you know, our concertmaster Rachel has transferred to Juilliard early," he announced, "which means we need to appoint a new lead chair before the showcase. Mr. Stone, you've been second chair. The position is yours if you want it." Nolan stepped forward, violin in hand. "Thank you, Professor, but I believe tradition calls for an audition. I'd like to earn the position properly." Murmurs of approval rippled through the orchestra. The perfect response from the perfect student. "Very well," Professor Kirkland agreed. "We'll hold auditions next Monday. Same piece for everyone. The Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto, first movement." Ellie's heart raced. She knew that concerto, had practiced it obsessively last year, though she'd never performed it. "Additionally," the conductor continued, "Dean Hargrove has informed me that we're required to open the audition to the entire student body, including scholarship applicants." This announcement was met with groans and eye rolls. Yes, I know, but rules are rules. Now, let's begin with the Sibelius. Ellie watched them play. Truly watched. Not just the notes and techniques, but how they moved together, how the strongest players supported weaker sections, how Professor Kirkland shaped their sound with subtle gestures. Most of all, she watched Nolan. Despite his arrogance, his playing was exceptional, his technique pristine, his interpretation mature beyond his years. This was what she would be up against. When her father signaled that rehearsal was ending, Ellie slipped away, her mind already formulating a plan. She had 5 days until the audition, 5 days to transform herself from rejected scholarship applicant to potential concertmaster. The next morning, Ellie arrived at school an hour early and headed straight for the music room. Her high school's facilities couldn't compare to Westmer's, but at least here she could practice undisturbed. She set up her phone to record herself playing the Tchaikovsky, then listened with unflinching criticism to every mistake, every weakness. Again and again she repeated the process, focusing on different aspects each time: intonation, dynamics, phrasing. During lunch, she hid in the library, studying recordings of great violinists performing the concerto. After school, she returned to the empty music room until the janitor kicked her out at 7. Thursday evening found her in Westmore's maintenance closet, having convinced her father to let her use the small space to practice after hours. "Just until the audition," she promised. "Then I'll stop bothering you." "You never bother me," he said softly. "But Ellie, if you don't make it..." "I know. It's not the end of the world. But it felt like it might be." This was her last chance to prove her mother's faith hadn't been misplaced. On Friday afternoon, as Ellie was leaving the closet after another practice session, she rounded a corner and crashed directly into Professor Whitten. "Miss Chen?" The professor's eyebrows knitted together. "What are you doing in this area?" "I was visiting my father," Ellie said quickly. "He works late on Fridays." Professor Whitten's gaze dropped to the violin case clutched in Ellie's hands. "I heard you've signed up for the concertmaster audition," Ellie nodded. "After your performance in my studio, I can't imagine what you hope to accomplish. I'll be better prepared this time. This isn't about preparation, it's about ability, natural talent." The professor's voice softened slightly. "Not everyone is meant for this life, Miss Chen. There's no shame in that." Before Ellie could respond, Nolan appeared behind Professor Whitten. "Ah, there you are, Professor," he said, then noticed Ellie. "Oh, hello again." "Miss Chen was just leaving," Professor Whitten said. "Actually," Nolan's eyes gleamed with sudden interest, "I heard you're auditioning on Monday. Bold choice." "I have as much right as anyone," Ellie said. Of course. In fact," he glanced at Professor Whitten, then back to Ellie, "we're having a small gathering Sunday night, a sort of pre-audition party at my house. You should come." "Nolan," Professor Whitten warned, "I don't think everyone who's auditioning will be there," he continued smoothly. "Networking is important in this industry, right, Professor?" "Well, yes, but perfect 8 o'clock, 1421 Riverwood Drive." He smiled at Ellie. "Don't be late." As they walked away, Ellie heard Professor Whitten hiss, "What are you doing, Nolan?" His response was too low to catch, but the laugh that followed sent ice through Ellie's veins. She should ignore the invitation. It was obviously a trap. But curiosity, and perhaps a stubborn desire to prove she belonged, won out. Sunday night found her standing before an imposing Tudor-style mansion, dressed in the nicest clothes she owned: black jeans, a grey sweater, and her mother's jade pendant for luck. Music and laughter spilled from the open doors. Inside, Ellie identified at least 30 students, all orbiting around Nolan as he held court in the center of a vast living room. "Ellie Chen," he called when he spotted her. "You came." Every head turned her way. Conversations paused. "To everyone," Nolan said, raising his glass. "This is Ellie. She's auditioning tomorrow." A few students nodded politely. Others whispered behind their hands. "Drink?" Nolan offered, appearing at her side with a glass of something amber. "No, thank you. Afraid I'll intoxicate you before the big day." He smirked. "Relax, it's just apple cider." Ellie accepted the glass but didn't drink. "So," Nolan said, loud enough for nearby students to hear, "tell us about yourself. Where did you study before Westmore?" "I haven't been accepted to Westmore." "Yet? Right, but before this, conservatory prep, private tutoring?" "Just school, and my mother when I was younger." "Fascinating." Nolan's eyes gleamed. "And where is she teaching now?" Ellie stiffened. "She's not." "Oh?" "Retired. She went back to China." "Ah." He nodded sagely. One of those tiger moms who couldn't hack it here then. The room fell silent. Someone gasped softly. "Don't talk about my mother," Ellie said, her voice dangerously quiet. "No offense intended," Nolan said, raising his hands. "I'm just trying to understand your unusual background. My background isn't your business. It is if you want to join our orchestra. We're like family here." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Speaking of which, I'm curious about this mysterious Berganzi of yours. Would you play something for us?" Before Ellie could respond, another voice cut in. "Leave her alone, Nolan." A girl with short dark hair and striking green eyes stepped forward. Ellie recognized her from orchestra rehearsal, a cellist who sat near the front. "Oh, come on, Zoe," Nolan said. "I'm just being friendly." "You're being a jerk," Zoe replied flatly. She turned to Ellie. "You don't have to play for anyone, and you definitely don't have to stay here." Nolan's expression hardened. "No one likes a killjoy, Zoe. And no one likes a bully," she shot back. To Ellie, she added, "I'm heading out. Need a ride?" Ellie nodded gratefully. As they moved toward the door, Nolan called after them. "See you tomorrow, Chen. Hope you've practiced your Tchaikovsky better than that pathetic Sibelius you butchered for Professor Witten." Laughter followed them outside. In Zoe's car, Ellie finally let out the breath she'd been holding. "Thanks for that. Don't mention it. Nolan's always been insufferable, but he's worse when he feels threatened." Ellie looked at her in surprise. "He's not threatened by me." Zoe shrugged. "You'd be surprised. Word gets around. The maintenance manager's daughter with a mysterious Bergonzi. People are curious. There's nothing mysterious about me." "Then why not tell them about your mother?" Ellie stared out the window. "It's complicated." "It always is." Zoe pulled up. In front of the address Ellie had given her, a modest apartment complex across town. "For what it's worth, good luck tomorrow. It would be nice to see Nolan's face if someone else got concertmaster." "It won't be me," Ellie said, "but thanks anyway." "Never know unless you try," Zoe replied with a small smile. That night, Ellie couldn't sleep. She practiced silently, fingers moving through the air above her bed, mapping every note of the Tchaikovsky until dawn streaked the sky. Monday arrived with a storm that matched Ellie's churning nerves. By the time she reached Westmore, rain had soaked through her jacket and left her hair plastered to her face. The auditorium was already buzzing with activity. 8 students had signed up to audition, with Nolan scheduled last. The position, Dove Honor. Ellie was third on the list. As she found a seat in the back row, she noticed her father quietly sweeping the aisles, pretending not to watch her. Dean Hargrove and Professor Kirkland sat at a table in the center of the auditorium. To Ellie's surprise, Professor Witten joined them, along with 2 other faculty members she didn't recognize. "Welcome to our concertmaster auditions," Dean Hargrove announced. "Each candidate will perform the first movement of Tchaikovsky's violin, Concerto in D major. You will be judged on technical proficiency, musicality, and leadership presence." The first 2 students performed admirably. One, a tall girl with braided hair, had particularly clean technique, though her interpretation felt safe, lacking emotion. Then it was Ellie's turn. As she walked toward the stage, Nolan's voice carried clearly from where he sat with his friends. "This should be entertaining." Someone snickered. Ellie's hands were cold as she removed her violin from its case. She could feel eyes upon her, some curious, some skeptical, some simply waiting for her to fail. Professor Kirkland nodded for her to begin. The opening notes were steady, if unremarkable. As Ellie moved deeper into the piece, she focused on the technical aspects she had drilled relentlessly over the past week. Her intonation was precise, her rhythm controlled, but something was missing. The music felt hollow, mechanical. She could see it in the judges' expressions. They were underwhelmed. In the middle of a difficult passage, her mind flashed to her mother's words from years ago. Technical perfection is nothing without heart. Play what you feel, not just what you see. Ellie had been so focused on proving her technical abilities that she'd forgotten why she played at all. She closed her eyes, abandoning herself to the music. Her body relaxed, her bow arm finding a freedom it had lacked moments before. The notes began to soar, to breathe, to tell a story. When she opened her eyes again, the judges were leaning forward in their seats. Even Dean Hargrove had set down his pen. The final cadenza approached, the most difficult section. Ellie had struggled with it during practice, never quite achieving the virtuosic flair it demanded. Now she surrendered to instinct. Her fingers flew across the fingerboard, executing double stops and runs with a passion that transformed their technical difficulty into emotional expression. As the movement concluded, Ellie lowered her violin, breathing hard. The auditorium was silent. Then, from the back, a single person began to clap. Her father, his usually stoic face alight with pride. Others joined in, hesitantly at first, then with growing enthusiasm. Zoe was on her feet. Even Professor Whitten had a hint of a smile. Only Nolan remained still, his face an unreadable mask. "Thank you, Miss Chen," Professor Kirkland said, making a note in his book. "That was unexpected." Ellie returned to her seat, legs shaking. The next 4 students performed, each technically accomplished but clearly rattled by the sudden shift in atmosphere. Then it was Nolan's turn. He took the stage with easy confidence, his Italian violin gleaming under the lights. His opening was flawless, rich, resonant, and technically impeccable. Every note was perfectly placed, every dynamic shaped with precision. But as he continued, Ellie noticed something strange. Nolan kept glancing at her, his concentration fracturing, slightly each time. His pristine technique remained, but the musicality began to feel forced, almost desperate. By the cadenza, a fine sheen of sweat had appeared on his forehead. The passage, which should have been his moment of triumph, felt rushed, aggressive rather than expressive. When he finished, the applause was immediate and loud, but Ellie caught the uncertainty in the judges' faces. "Thank you, everyone," Dean Hargrove announced. "The faculty will deliberate. Results will be posted tomorrow morning." As students began to disperse, Nolan approached Ellie, his expression tight. "Where did that come from?" he demanded. "You could barely play Sibelius last week. I practiced." "No, one improves that much in a week." His eyes narrowed. "Who are you, really?" Before she could answer, Professor Whitten appeared beside them. "Miss Chen, a moment." Nolan retreated, but not before giving Ellie a look that promised their conversation wasn't over. Professor Whitten led Ellie to a quiet corner of the auditorium. "That was quite a transformation from your audition in my studio. I worked hard, clearly." The professor studied her. "Your technical skills still need refinement, but your musicality, that's not something that can be taught." Ellie remained silent. "Your mother," Professor Whitten said carefully. "What was her name?" Lin Chen." Recognition flashed across the professor's face. "Not Lin Chen, who studied with Zakharov at Moscow Conservatory?" Ellie nodded slowly. She was brilliant, one of the most promising violinists of her generation. Then she disappeared. What, 10 years ago? After the Beijing International Competition? 11 years, Ellie corrected softly. After she won gold. And then gave it up, Professor Whitten mused. For what? To teach in some rural Chinese academy? She never taught again, Ellie said. She doesn't play anymore. What? Why? It's personal. Ellie clutched her violin case tighter. If there's nothing else, Professor, actually there is. Professor. Whitten straightened. The scholarship you applied for covers a single semester, but there's another program, full tuition, 4 years, including summer intensives at Tanglewood. Ellie's heart skipped. I didn't see that option on the website. It's not listed. It's by nomination only. A small smile. I'd like to nominate you, but my audition for the first scholarship was a failure, yes, but I believe I misunderstood what I was seeing. The professor glanced at Ellie's violin case. That Bergonzi, it was your mother's competition instrument, wasn't it? Ellie nodded. She wanted you to follow in her footsteps. No, Ellie said, quietly. She wanted me to forge my own path. The next morning, Ellie arrived at Westmore early. A small crowd had already gathered around the notice board where the results would be posted. Nolan stood at the center, his friends clustered around, him like courtiers awaiting a coronation. When Dean Hargrove appeared with the results, a hush fell over the group. He pinned the paper to the board and stepped back. For a moment, no one moved. Then, as if drawn by an invisible force, they surged forward. Gasps, murmurs. Someone said, "That can't be right." Nolan pushed through the crowd, his face draining of color as he read the results. Ellie hung back, heart pounding. She didn't need to see the paper to know what had happened. It was written across every shocked face. Zoe found her first, grinning widely. "Congratulations, Concertmaster Chen." The words felt unreal. "Are you sure? See for yourself." As if in a dream, Ellie approached the notice board. The crowd parted reluctantly, revealing the single name at the top of the list. Chen, Ellie. Behind her, a voice cut through the silence. "This is ridiculous. She can't even—" "Nolan." Professor Kirkland's voice was sharp. "The decision is final." Nolan's face flushed dark red. "She shows up out of nowhere, can barely play Sibelius 1 week, then suddenly she's Heifetz. There's something wrong here." "The only thing wrong," Professor Witten said, appearing beside Kirkland, "is your inability to recognize exceptional talent when it doesn't come in an expected package." "Talent?" Nolan spat the word. "She hasn't spent years studying with masters. She hasn't devoted her life to this art form. She's the janitor's daughter with a violin she probably doesn't even own legally." A collective gasp rose from the crowd. "Mr. Stone," Dean Hargrove thundered. "That is quite enough." But Nolan was beyond restraint. He turned to Ellie, face contorted. "Who are you? Where did you really get that Bergonzi? Why are you really here?" Ellie stood perfectly still, staring back at him. Then, with deliberate calm, she opened her violin case. The beautiful instrument gleamed in the morning light as she lifted it carefully. "I am Ellie Chen," she said, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent hallway. "Daughter of Lin Chen, gold medalist at the Beijing International Violin Competition and former student of Zakharov." Professor Witten nodded confirmation when heads turned her way. "I'm also the daughter of Wei Chen, who has kept this school running for 15 years without a single person noticing him. And this," she lifted the violin higher, "is my mother's legacy. My legacy now." She tucked the instrument under her chin and began to play. Not Tchaikovsky or Sibelius this time, but a Chinese folk melody her mother had taught her first. Simple, haunting, filled with longing for home. The crowd stood transfixed. Even Nolan's anger seemed to falter in the face of something so honest. When she finished, Professor Kirkland stepped forward. "First rehearsal as concertmaster. Tomorrow, 4 o'clock. He glanced at Nolan. "Second chair will be Ms. Harper." Nolan's face went slack with shock. Not even second chair. As the crowd dispersed, whispering excitedly, Ellie found herself face to face with him. "This isn't over," he said, but the threat sounded hollow. "It is for now," she replied. Later that afternoon, Ellie found her father in his usual spot, quietly maintaining the building that housed so many dreams, including now her own. "Dad," she called softly. He turned, a rare smile lighting his weathered face. "Concertmaster." "You heard." Everyone heard. He set down his tools. "Your mother would be proud." "I'm going to call her tonight," Ellie said. "Tell her everything. It's been 2 years, I know, but maybe—" She paused. "Maybe she'll come for the showcase. Maybe." He squeezed her shoulder. "And if not, I will be there. Front row. 3 months later, as spring blossoms appeared across campus, Ellie stood before the Westmore Academy Orchestra, violin in hand. The showcase auditorium was filled to capacity. Industry professionals, conservatory scouts, proud families. In the front row sat her father, wearing a suit for the first time since her mother's departure. Beside him, an empty seat saved just in case. The past months had transformed Ellie. Private lessons with Professor Witten, masterclasses with visiting virtuosos, hours of practice that honed her natural talent into disciplined artistry. Nolan had eventually settled into third chair, his initial resentment gradually softening into grudging respect. They would never be friends, but they had found a working relationship built on mutual dedication to music. As Ellie raised her bow to cue the orchestra, a late arrival slipped into the auditorium. From the corner of her eye, Ellie saw her father. Turn, then freeze. A woman in a red dress moved quietly toward the empty seat. Ellie's bow arm faltered for just a moment. Then she straightened, drew a deep breath, and gave the signal to begin. The music rose around her, no longer a means of proving herself, but a bridge connecting past to future, mother to daughter, silence to voice. Later, people would say it was the finest performance in Westmore's history. But in that moment, Ellie played for only one person, the woman who had given her both a priceless instrument and the courage to use it. When the final note faded, the audience rose as one. Applause thundered through the hall. Ellie lowered her violin and bowed. As she straightened, her eyes found her mother's across the distance. In that gaze lay years of separation, of questions unanswered and words unspoken, but also pride, recognition. The silent acknowledgement that some gifts transcend distance and time. We often search for belonging in the wrong places, in titles, in pedigrees, in the approval of those who would exclude us. But true belonging is found in honoring who we are, where we come from, and the gifts we carry inside us. Sometimes the most powerful music comes from those who were never invited to play.